All right, we are live for the second stream of the day. Oh my goodness. I am guessing for not as many viewers for this stream, and hopefully, definitely a more chill kind of off the beaten path stream. So today we are going to be doing, and let me make sure I get the chat up here so I can actually see it. Excellent. Hello Alex, welcome back to the stream. So let me get to the side cam to do the introduction. Today we are going to be doing Arduino after the Genshin. So my plan is I want to get you guys or anyone watching the VOD in the future a complete tutorial for blinking LEDs, which is kind of the most basic thing you can do with Arduino. So the first couple of things I'm going to do is to just show you all the parts that I have and where I got it, because like I find that's often the hardest part of doing any sort of like DIY project is just like, what do you want to do? And like get a plan for what to buy in order to do the thing you want to do. Like usually by the time you're doing execution, you should have your stuff already figured out before you break out the tools. So I'm gonna start with some of these parts and I'll show you guys where I got it. Today's goal is to have this Arduino control a LED. LEDs, I'm sure you've heard the acronym, but it stands for light emitting diode. This is an LED right here. And I'll go over kind of the specifications for the LED and where you can get this. So we want this board to light up this LED. So if we can light up one LED, that's the first step to lighting up a large number of LEDs. Is my Luppet still running? I think Luppet is dead, but let me fire that back up. Okay. All right, and let me fire up my Luppet again so that I have some expressiveness to my definitely non-robotic emotions. Where is character positioning? And this is some of the behind the scenes details for how some of my setup works. Anyway, so we have the Arduino board here. I will show you guys where I got this. Let's go to the desktop. And let me get a window for Amazon of all things. So if you guys are doing any sort of electronics projects, there's pretty much two large like brands or areas where you can do a project like this that's well supported, has large communities. There is Arduino, and then there's Raspberry Pi. And you might have heard of some of these names before. Okay. So Arduino, this is the board that we have here, and it comes in all sorts of forms. This is kind of the base version that usually you would prototype with, but it comes in all sorts of sizes and form factors, and like the difference between them is that it's just in the size. For the most part, like they all have the same number of pins, they all have kind of the same power specifications. I wouldn't say they're exactly identical, like there's some features that are only available on the larger ones, like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Oh, excuse me. I really ate that dinner way too quick. Please excuse me. And you can get like attachments to these where you can solder it together in order to be able to read like SD cards or to have Bluetooth functionality. But we got kind of the basic one today. This is the Arduino Uno. So this is Arduino. And then the other project that is kind of in the micro prototyping controllers category is a Raspberry Pi. And I actually have both. Let me see if I can grab my Raspberry Pi. And a Raspberry Pi is more complex than an Arduino, and also more expensive than an Arduino. You can tell that the board is much bigger than the Arduino board, and it has more ports, right? Like if you look at the Arduino, it has, let me switch over to the side cam. It just has this like USB port right here, and then it has this power port right here. But if you look at the Raspberry Pi, you've got some USB ports. You've even got an Ethernet port. If I turn it over, it has a HDMI port. It also has, I think this is an audio port, audio jack port. So the difference between the two is that Arduinos, they have, you program the Arduino and then you upload the program to your Arduino. And also my Muppet has completely lost track of my face, and that I'm just kind of in this slouched position, which doesn't look super comfortable. Let me see if I can get it to register again. Oh, okay, excellent. Whereas the Raspberry Pi, this is a full-on computer in this little board. It has an HDMI port, it has a power port. If you think about your PC, it has an HDMI port. You can literally plug this as a computer into your monitor and then use it as a computer. Like, I've installed Ubuntu on this. You can install like very lightweight Linux on this. Arduino, on the other hand, much less resources, less RAM, less CPU. You can't run a whole operating system in here. You can only run programs. Like Toast says, wait, what happened to your nail? This is a very interesting story, which I'll probably end up telling quite a few times. So the one-liner story behind it that sounds super metal is that I damaged my nail while modifying exercise equipment. I lifted so hard that my nail turned black. But the actual truth is I do lifts, but I didn't hurt myself while lifting. I hurt myself while cleaning up the equipment for lifting, and I have this like folding bench, and while I was folding it up, it pinched me on my nail here, so I have quite a bit of necrosis on this nail that's been here for the last month and a half. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's waterproof, but it looks very scary. So don't worry, I am not in pain. It was very painful when it first happened, but this is way past me at this point. But yeah, at some point, I expect it to eventually be regrown, but it could be months, if not years. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. One reason I picked Arduino over Raspberry Pi is Raspberry Pi, you have a full computer on here, but the downside is you have a full operating system that you have to program against. And I've used the Raspberry Pi for similar microcontroller projects before, but the timings are not there. When you're working with the Arduino, you're working directly with the hardware. You say, hey, I want this pin to have like 5 volts, and then immediately it goes to 5 volts. As opposed to when you're programming with an operating system, you don't have access to the raw hardware. So if you say like, I want like 50 milliseconds of on, 50 milliseconds of off, it'll still spend time on system events, and then your timings might be off. So it's very hard to program against analog electronics with the Raspberry Pi, which is why it's gonna go back into the bag. And to give you guys some idea of some of the prices for these things, let me go back to the desktop. See, I am learning. If I search for Arduino, and like the easy one to get started with, like if you go to the Arduino website, there's like all sorts of Arduinos there. There's the Nano, and then there's the Uno. Where's the hardware list? There's ones with Bluetooth. You've got the Uno adapter for the original Uno. There's ones that have shielding. There's ones with all sorts of modules. So what projects would Raspberry Pis be good for? So in the past, I've used Raspberry Pis for a Google Cloud Print server. If I wanted to just like run something that requires an operating system and expects, a kernel, and you want to run a very small server, you want to run something that has a full operating system, you want to run like a Minecraft server, that would be a good use case for the Raspberry Pi. But when it comes to like raw hardware programming, you're better off with the Uno. But the language is also a little bit harder to work with. 69 Fartlord 69, hello and welcome. There seems to be one with an anal attachment. I'm gonna have to kick you from the chat, and if you come back, I might have to ban you. So please do not go off topic thinking that you are having a good time. Let's see. Let me open that up real quick so that I can kick you. Oh wait, I have whoops. I have commands to kick, I think. Goodbye. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try this one. Did that work? Nah, still did not work. Alright, I'm just gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way. Bye-bye. Okay, that was not too hard, but that was the first time that I had to go and kick or ban someone. Anyway, so back to the topic at hand. A Raspberry Pi would be much better for... speaking of which, I need to go and set up my stream elements to enable those commands. A Raspberry Pi would be much better for like home server projects. You can also set it up to run as a router if you have enough ports set up on it. But at that point, you might as well just buy like a dedicated switch appliance in order to do that, because this probably doesn't have enough resources. To go back to the desktop, I think some of the modern Raspberry Pis, so I think I have like a Pi 2. I don't remember the actual numbers on it. But the 4 apparently has 2 micro HDMI ports, 2 4 or 8 gigabytes of RAM, and a pretty good powerful processor. Obviously, I have a pretty shitty version at this point. This is from like 2014, 2015. What was it? So yeah, it runs very similar to a full-on computer. But today we are looking at the Arduino, and to give you some idea of the price of these things, Arduino, the first one that you will want to start off with is just going to be the Arduino Uno. I think I have the Rev 3 instead of the Rev 4. It's usually printed on the board, which is kind of it's the revision number. And this is just 23 bucks. And I think on Amazon you might even be able to find ones that are even cheaper. Well, 23 bucks from the first party Arduino, and but I think you can actually get ones that are cheaper. Yeah, so the Elegu, Elegu is a brand that is they make the same specifications as our Arduino, because Arduino, all of the like circuitry, all of the schematics, all of that is open source. So it's free for anyone to like build the actual physical hardware. So you can definitely find Arduino Unos for cheaper than even $23. You can find one for $14, for example. But usually for your first project, I would definitely recommend getting like a first party product, just because like you don't have to worry about compatibility or drivers or something not working, right? You're starting off at the same state that everyone else is starting off at. But this is a pretty cheap product if you want to test this out, as opposed to the Raspberry Pi, which as you saw earlier has like 8 gigabytes of RAM. Raspberry Pi. Right, so a regular Raspberry Pi kit will cost you $90, right? Like that's a lot more expensive than like a $23 board. And just to give some of the specs of the Arduino, it has the memory size is only 8 kilobytes, right? Like this thing can go up to 8 gigabytes. The other one's 8 kilobytes. That's 1024 multiplier worth of difference. So definitely a big jump in specifications, but also very different use case applications. But today we are going to do just a very fancy, or a very non-fancy, very simple LED project. After you get the Arduino from Amazon or wherever you would have purchased it, the other things you want to do in order to have like a full testing kit is you'll want well, wires, right? Like, because the way that signals get sent for processing is by wires, and over from like the very top. Let me see if I can get to the side cam again, and hopefully you guys can see some of this. But there's a list of pins up top, and all of these are labeled. Let me see what is the whatchamacallit focus on this. I don't know if I can focus, but these are all labeled pins, and you can plug wires directly into these holes. And the code that you write will tell these holes or these pins which ones to light up or which ones to send signal to and at what time intervals. So in order to send signals, you would need wires, and in order to get wires, you can buy those on Amazon. So what I did was I purchased one of so the same brand again, Elegoo. They sell wire kits, and let me see if I can pull that up on Amazon as well, just to show what that looks like. So if you search for Arduino Uno, that is kind of the first result. But if you just scroll down a little bit, Elegoo does sell like a basics getting started kit. There's a lot of things in here. I think the one that I got, I don't think it's this one. They have like several different packs, but there's a couple of components that you want to make sure that you have. First is a breadboard. So I have mine right here, which is the physical breadboard. This is your this is the way for you to hook things up with wires without using a soldering iron, because a soldering iron is pretty troublesome to use, and it's not very undoable. Like it's very hard to unsolder something. But with a breadboard, you can just kind of plug wires in and then unplug them. And I'll show you guys how to read this as well as like how to use it as well. Second is you definitely want wires. So like on the bottom left here, there's a bundle of wires that can be inserted into the pins in order to hook things up, and that's in my box that we'll show in a bit as well. And then third, you want a list of, or not a list, but you want a series of capacitors. So these are these little bulby things that are blue. Each one of them has a little marking on them that is color coded, and there's a chart that helps you read the color codes. And the color codes, they're kind of like Roman numerals, where you put the values together in order to come up with the final value. And I'll show some of how to use resistors in a bit as well. So you got the breadboard, which is kind of your circuitry layout. You got some wires, which allows you to write your logic in hardware, so to speak. Resistors are generally useful for most electronics projects, but I will go over them in detail. And then lastly, you want to make sure your kit has LED bulbs, because this is how you turn electricity into light, right? So without having one of these, you don't actually know which lanes have power and which lanes don't. And these are very useful for debugging things, right? Like imagine trying to write code without having a monitor. That's going to be pretty hard. And a monitor, what it is just a very large list of LED bulbs in some ways. So you definitely want a Arduino. You definitely want some wires in order to do your hardware programming, so to speak. And then one last thing that might be useful but is not required is a voltmeter. This could be useful for debugging problems, but it's not like a hard requirement, and they're generally pretty cheap. And it's one of those things that you rather have and not need than need and not have. So voltmeter, very inexpensive. These things have been around for a very long time. You can get a very basic one. This is definitely one of those devices where, unless you're going to be using it outside of this project, you don't want to spend a lot of money on it. And I think that's it for all the items that we have. Eventually, when we get to the LED mask, we're going to be using these LED bulbs. Each one of them has its own little microcontroller. You know, it's wire in and out and power and all of that. But for now, we are just going to make sure that the board itself works and that we can have it output signals. We will figure out what signals to send in a future session. Okay, so we are on the desktop, and let's get started with programming this. First thing you want to do, obviously, plug it into your computer. So I have this cable here. Oh, by the way, my GoPro here, it randomly zooms in, and that's part of the firmware, and I can't change that until they update the firmware, so I'm sorry if it randomly zooms in while I was trying to show something, and I hope it was still understandable. Anyway, so I have this USB mini, I think this is a mini B, or this is just a B, USB 2.0 B plug, and I am holding the Raspberry Pi unintentionally. No, we want to plug in the Arduino, not the Raspberry. So I can just plug this in directly. So it has a USB port, just plug it in to your computer, get a cable. And then you'll see that the board lights up. There's some, there's a green, and then there is, let me turn off my lights for the living room. There is a green, and then there is a yellow light that is gonna be big soon. Yeah. That has turned on as soon as I plugged it in. It just shows that there's enough power. The yellow light, I think, what is it labeled as? It doesn't have a label. It has a label of L. I don't know what L means. Those are the kind of things that you have to learn along the way while you're doing the programming. So anyway, this thing is on, and it is. We'll put it right here. And then next, let's go and download the Arduino software, because Arduino comes with its own IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. But what it basically is it's a very fancy text editor for your code that allows you to press one button in order to deploy your code onto the machine. Let's just Google for, let's start from scratch, right? Let's just Google for Arduino getting started. And as you guys can tell, I did some prep work ahead of the stream to make sure that I knew what I was talking about. So this is the first link, getting started with Arduino products, and then there's a guide on doing this. I think this, I'm like zoomed in a little bit too much. I don't think this was the one that I saw earlier. Getting started tutorial. Getting started with Arduino products. So this first step is to just install the integrated development environment. So this is the fancy, am I still sidecam? I am still sidecam. Let me go back to desktop. So I've gone to Google, and then I have searched for Arduino getting started tutorial. So the guide says you have to install the IDE first. We're just gonna go with Windows. And there's all these instructions to follow, but basically they're asking you to download it. We're gonna go to the download page. There's a couple of download options. It took me a while to figure this out, but apparently the zip file is the portable version of the app, which means you don't actually need to install it in order to use it. But we do want to install it because it has more compatibility when it's not the portable version. Just gonna install the Windows version. Are we gonna support the donation maybe at another time? Let's just go and download. We got this exe, which I've already downloaded before the stream to make sure that I had enough content. And let's go over to the folder. Just double click on the installer. and then walk through the steps. I mean, if you guys know how to use Windows, you guys know how to install Arduino. So it's detecting that I've already got it installed from before the stream when I was testing this, and it's asking me if I want to uninstall it, right? Yeah, and I do not want to uninstall it. You guys can go through this on your own time as well. Does Arduino have its own programming language? That is a very good question, and I believe the technically correct answer is yes, they do have their own programming language, but it is very similar to C. Arduino language. I think you can compile, yeah. So they do have their own integrated language. Yep. But I think you can write other apps that compile into the Arduino language. Although you'd have to be careful about that because the Arduino is very hardware limited in hardware resources. So after the compilation, the program might be so big that it doesn't even fit on your Arduino anymore. Let's see, is Arduino based on C or C++? It doesn't run C or C++. It runs code that's compiled from C or C++. It has its own compiler for its own instruction set. Yeah, so it's not x86, it's not x64 AMD, it's not, I think it is a CISC instruction, or sorry, it is a RISC instruction set if you want to get really technical about it. But it has its own instruction set that is very different from anything Intel based or AMD based. Yo, Chop Soy, Miss Pokecat, hello, welcome to the stream. We are doing Arduino today, of all things. I'm glad you're able to join us because I know you are also a big fan of this and you know a lot more about this than I do. So hopefully when I run into issues, I can ask you for possible triaging scenarios. But yes, welcome to the stream, and I'm glad that you could make it. So today our goal is just to make an LED light up on the Arduino in order to prove that the Arduino is still working and I have all the IDE and everything installed correctly. I was just going over some of the product lineup for the items that I purchased in order to make this work. It's all available on Amazon. It's just an Arduino Uno and then some of the solderless breadboard, some of the kits there. Gonna lurk for a bit. All right, thank you, Alex, and I hope you enjoy your alternative activities. Pokecat says, Hiki, I've been building custom flight controls for SFX with Arduino recently, so yeah. Wow, okay, so I can definitely stand to learn a lot from you because I am just barely getting started with Arduino and there is definitely a lot to learn. Currently we have the Arduino, it is powered, and we're gonna try and make the LED light up, and the first thing I'm gonna do is just search for a tutorial. This is like half of programming is just knowing how to search. So let's go to Google again. And yes, I know I can search in the URL bar, but it's just, I want the text to be big so that it's viewable by stream. We're just gonna search for Arduino LED link. And I believe the Arduino website has a very simple blinking LED tutorial. Basically, we're gonna make our circuit board look like this, and then we're gonna upload some code, and then we're just gonna run the code, and that's about it. So there's hardware, there's software, and then there's testing. So hardware-wise, we have the Arduino board. This is let me turn on my living room lights again so that the lighting is hopefully a little bit better. And let me also turn on this lighting over here so that it's a little bit more easily viewable from the camera. And let me double check that I can see my camera to know what it looks like on stream. Okay, cool. So let's go back to the camera, which is right here. Yes. So there are some pins here, and if you guys remember from the desktop capture diagram, we want the second pin right here to go into the third pin with a light bulb in between, as well as with a resistor in between. So let's re-look at the desktop again. It's here. So it comes out of, well, coming out is relative, but it comes out of pin number 13 here. So if you read the pins, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's see if I can make this even bigger. 0 through 7, and then we have number 8, 9, and then this, it says 0, 1, but it's actually 1, 0. So it's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we want the resistor to come out of 13 and then go into a light emitting diode, which is our LED, and then going back into ground. So whenever you're working with electronics, generally the high-level concept is you have the idea of like positive and negative ends, right? Like I think that's something that everyone can relate to, is you plug in a device to a wall and then there's two prongs and then there's a positive end, there's a negative end. The negative end, we call that ground. And then the positive end, we call that, well, positive end or lead, or essentially there is like there's a high voltage side and then there's a low voltage side. And in between the high and low is where all of your load is where your vacuum is, which is a load. Or in our case, our load is going to be this LED. So like the energy that is lost by going from the high voltage to the low voltage, the energy is going to be dissipated as photons, which is how LEDs work. So you might ask, okay, so we have this tiny little light bulb, LED, and this is our load. So why do we need another like cork looking thing with 3 red bands on it? Why do we need a resistor in the way? Well, the thing about LEDs is in the past, LEDs or light bulbs, back in Thomas Edison's era, they used to be very high load, which means you would need to put a lot of energy into them in order for them to shine brightly. But these days, LEDs are extremely efficient, to the point that they are not a very big load. In fact, they're so tiny of a load that they might as well be considered a straight wire. There's very few resistance in this. So when the electricity flows from the high voltage to the low voltage side, you want to add a bit of resistance in between, because if you don't add a bit of resistance, then it just falls from the high to the low. It falls way too quickly. And if it falls way too quickly, then things heat up. And if things heat up, then you have a fire. We're not going to have a fire here. Obviously, all of this voltage is way too low to have any sort of fire, even if we did wire it around. But we do want a resistor here. That way we don't burn out the LED bulb in here. So a resistor is pretty much a crappy wire. Regular wires carry electricity. Crappy wires carry electricity, but not as quickly, I guess, is the word. If you guys remember back to your physics class, that would be called current, potential, electrical voltage, and resistance. But you can think of it as it's an obstacle in the way from getting from high to low, and then that prevents the speed from being too high that it burns out the bulb. So we're gonna add a resistor in the way, and this is a resistor. So I got this resistor. Let me see if I can. It's way too tiny. Let's go to the side cam. So this is a resistor, and it is way tiny. Yeah, this is where I wish I had some sort of a magnifying lens. And you can see it has 2 sides to it, and electricity goes in from one side, and then it kind of gets slowed down in the resistor itself, which is the little pill, and then it comes out slower on the other side. I mean, these aren't technical terms, you would say, with less current. But that's essentially what this does, is it slows down the electricity. In between the 2 leads, there is a voltage drop. So between the high voltage and the low voltage, you would have a high side and a low side. And this little resistor, it's symmetrical, so you can flip it upside down so that the high goes to low and the low goes to the high. So you can flip it upside down, and it works exactly the same way. And what we're gonna do is we're going to send electricity into the positive lead of the LED, and then come out the negative lead of the LED. And then from the negative of the LED, you go into the positive of the resistor and comes out the negative of the resistor. So exactly how it looks in the diagram that is on my desktop, which I will show right now. That's Genshin, and this is my desktop. So the positrons, which for historical purposes, we don't track the path of the electron, we track the path of the positron, which is not actually the particle that it's traveling, but it's a equivalent representation. Basically, we discovered the positive lead and the negative lead, and for some reason we decided to go with the negative being where the electrons end up, rather than, negative being where the electrons come from rather than where the electrons end up. Yes, confused phase, me too. But basically, electrons come out of the negative lead, they go into the positive lead. But for electrical engineering purposes, the convention is to look at things coming out of the positive lead and going into the negative lead, and we would call them positrons, even though they're not actual antimatter electrons. Anyway, electricity, we would say, comes out of number 13 and then goes into the resistor, has a very small, has a voltage drop, and then goes into the diode and then makes the light bulb shine, and then goes into ground, which is negative. Again, physically what's happening is electrons are coming out of the pathway I just described in the reverse order, but the convention is to describe it as if there are positrons coming out of the positive lead. But yes, it's an unfortunate thing that happened several hundred years ago, when we said that negative is where, we essentially flipped the sign a couple hundred years ago when we first started investigating stuff, and it took us way too long to figure out where the real particles are flowing from. Anyway, historical context aside, let's go and build this diagram. So we have a breadboard here, and I will show you guys how to wire this up with a breadboard, because a breadboard, or the proper term would be a solderless breadboard, is a very useful item to have. But before I get to the actual physical item on my camera, let's go over a diagram of a solderless breadboard. Solderless breadboard. So this is generally like a prototyping tool that's used to avoid soldering stuff. And let's look at a diagram. Yes, this is a very good diagram. So if you guys look at the camera for a bit, there's a diagram. Let me make the diagram really big so that it's relatable. How do I make this big? Big. Google, make it big. Okay, so let me zoom this all the way in, because I know I'm streaming in 720p, which is not a high enough resolution to look at all the individual items. But this is the top of my breadboard. It's a diagram, and all of the little dashes in between the squares are wires, and all of the little squares are pins or holes on my breadboard. This breadboard is full of tiny little holes, and some of these holes are connected, other parts of these holes are not connected. So the way that they are connected is that there are, I guess, like two halves to the breadboard which are symmetrical, right? Like if you split it down the middle, there's the left half and then there's the right half, and they're symmetrical to each other. And then on each half, on the edge of each half, there are red holes and blue holes that are connected to each other. So like these are columns that are connected, as opposed to the main part of the half, between the A, B, C, D, E, F, H, I, J, K. These are horizontally soldered together. So I have like a sticker at the bottom of the breadboard. If I were to peel it off, there would literally be wires that are connected exactly to this diagram. And the way for using this breadboard is you would usually, like previously we talked about high and low voltage, you would send the high and low voltage to the red and blue respectively. And that would be kind of your power supply. Same way that in your house you have like wall plugs everywhere, and behind those wall plugs, all of those are soldered together to your main power supply, right? So that's your house's grid. And in this case, for the breadboard, the red and blue leads, those are the breadboard's power supply. So you would usually plug the blue and red leads over to your real power supply, so maybe a battery. And then on the rows here, between the rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with each of the columns A, B, C, D, and E, each of the rows are soldered together, so they each act as a wire, and this is very flexible, right? Because you can connect like rows 1 and 3 together if you want them to be contacted. That way you don't actually have to solder 2 physical wires using a soldering iron, which is a lot of work. So let's take a look. I'm gonna grab this a picture of this, take a screenshot, and then let's go and put it into MS Paint. And let's have a basic plan for how we're gonna wire this together. So maybe we have our positive lead, and let me make this somewhat thick so that it's actually visible. Yeah, okay. And maybe a little bit thicker. Can I? Well, okay. So this is probably good enough. So we have like a positive lead and we have a negative lead that comes out of our Arduino board, and we can have. So maybe this is our Arduino board, and then we have pin number 13 here that we saw earlier. That should be our positive lead, and then we have the ground here. And we just want a wire that connects from ground to ground, right? And then we want another one from 13, which is our positive lead, to the red wire. So from positive to positive, negative to negative. Now all of our thick, THICC, big thicks. Now all of our rails on the side, these are powered. And like if you really wanted to use the left side of the breadboard, you would also wire up the red with the red and then the blue with the blue on the rail side. But we're not going to use the left side of the breadboard because this is a relatively simple diagram. But if you recall, we wanted the positive to go to a resistor, and then from the resistor to the diode, and then from the diode to the negative, right? So right now we have number 13 going to the positive, and then from the positive, let's just wire it over to row number 1. So that way we use row number 1 in order to do our logic programming, and then we use the rails just to do straight up power. So what do we want the positive lead to be connected to? Well, we want it to be connected to the resistor, right? So 1 is the positive lead, right? Like row number 1 is connected to the power rail is connected to pin number 13. So all we have to do is put the positive lead of the resistors don't have positive leads, but put one lead of the resistor into row 1, and then the other one into maybe row number 3. So I'm just gonna draw this here. So if we have a resistor that crosses between row number 1 and then row number, I guess, 4 now, right? So we have pretty much this part of the diagram figured out. But then where do we want to go after that? Well, we want the diode, which is our LED. So we want to plug the LED also into row number 4. LED, or I guess I'll do diode. Because it is a light emitting diode, and then we'll have the diode connect between row number 4 and row number 8, right? So then we have this part of the diagram already wired out, and then all we have to do is send row number 8 back to the negative end. So all we have to do is have another wire from number 8 over to to the negative end, and that goes over back to ground. So we can effectively have this this diagram by wiring up using a breadboard this way. And this is really good because if we go to the side cam, here is our breadboard, here is our diode, here is our tiny little resistor, and then we have wires to make all of this happen. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me go and open this up. Traditionally, red is used for positive and black is for negative, or in other words, this is the live lead, and then this is the ground. So we are going to plug, according to the diagram, pin number 13, I believe, according to the tutorial that was on. Let me double check. Where is the window? I've lost the window. Window, where are you? Did I close the window? Oh no, there it is. Okay, so here's and let me just verify that for you guys. Yeah, okay, so from number 13 to ground. So all we have to do is find number 13 here, which is oh, that's not close enough. And this is close enough. Okay, so number 13 here, we're just gonna plug this lead directly into number well, 13 is live, right? But this is black, so we want ground. So black into the ground. So now we have a wire that's coming out of the ground pin. And then for the red wire, we're gonna plug that into number 13. So number 13. And then all we have to do from here is plug these two into, so these two are coming out of the breadboard, or are coming out of the Arduino, and they're going to the breadboard. If you're wondering why I have two different length wires, it's because I couldn't find one. That's the only reason. But we're gonna go and plug the live and the ground over to the rails here. So red into red, and then black into blue. I don't know why breadboards are traditionally blue for ground, but that's the way it is. So back to our desktop. We've made the connections for this wire right here, and then also this wire over here. So these two are done. So then let's go from the live, which is the red wire in the breadboard, and let's go to row number 1. So we're gonna make this connection now, right here. Okay, so back to the side cam, and let's go and get some more wires. Let's use a green one this time, so it's just from the box. We're gonna go from the live rail over to row number 1 on the breadboard, and this is very tiny, so it's gonna be hard to see, but you're just gonna take my word that I'm wiring up to row number 1. So going back into the desktop, I've made this connection here, and then what we would need is this resistor here that connects from row number 1 to row number 4. So going over to the side cam, here is my little resistor, and hopefully my webcam firmware stops randomly zooming into things that it thinks are faces. Here's a resistor. I'm going to have one end go to row number 1, the other one go to row number 4. And I know this is tiny, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. And let's give the camera a close-up shot of what this looks like right now. So, yep, you can see the resistor going from 1 over to 4. Alright, so far so good. Back to the diagram. Let's go, and we just got the resistor up top, and then let's get the diode right after the resistor. Back to side cam, here is the diode. One thing to know about the diode is if you look closely, there is a longer end and a shorter end, right? The one that's, I believe, on the right side of the screen right now, if things aren't flipped, that is the longer end, and then the one on the left is the shorter end. And it's not an optical illusion, it's actually longer. And the longer end is always the positive end, and that's just a convention for building these solid state electronics. So we're gonna go and plug in this diode over to row number, what is it? Back to the desktop. Row number 4 for the positive end. And then let's just do row number 5 for the negative end, because in the diagram it looks like the diode would be much bigger than it actually is. Hello, we have some new viewers. Welcome to the stream. We are testing out the integrity of this Arduino board. This is meant to be a from zero. Oh my goodness, my leopard model, his neck. It's so untracked. Okay, let me block my camera and then hopefully, okay, I can move my head again. Okay, awesome. We are gonna try and make this LED light up just to test that the board is still working and that I still do know what I'm talking about. Jane Upster, hello and welcome back to the stream from my previous stream. I'm glad that you can make it. Anyway, so according to the diagram, we are going to go from row number 4 over to row number 8, but the diode is not long enough for row number 8, so we're just gonna go to row number 5. Okay, all right, let me see if I can show off this this wiring right now, but basically I have the diode jump from row number 4 over to row number 5, and all we have to do now is to get from the negative lead of the diode, which is on row number 5, we have to jump that back to ground, and that will complete our circuit. So let's go and grab a wire in order to make that last jump from physically row number 5, but on the diagram that we have row number 8. Right, so anyway, from the negative lead of the diode back to the negative rail, which is gonna be our ground. Okay, so I have completed the diagram, and as you can see, the LED is already blinking. Let me go and turn off some of the lighting so that this is visible. Is it visible on cam? I need to shift it this way. Okay. Okay, I guess I'm just gonna be able to not use my mouse pad. But let me go and turn off some of these studio lights as well as my own living room lighting so that the whatchamacallit is visible. The blinking is visible. Okay, so it's currently not blinking anymore, which I'm not sure why. Did I accidentally adjust the wire in a way such that so that goes to positive goes over, it was blinking just a few minutes ago, but I think that's because I had the code already loaded up on it. Insta360, if you can zoom out please. Okay, cool. So let's go back to our desktop. So I should have already made this circuit and it should already be wired up. But there shouldn't be any code that's running on the Arduino yet sending these signals. Not yet. Right, so let's go and open up the Arduino software that we just installed a while ago. So that's the Arduino app. I know it's tiny for you guys. I'm gonna zoom in just a bit. Yes, so usually when you launch Arduino, it shows up like this. And let me make sure that the COM port is set properly by unplugging this and then replugging it back in. Okay, so usually it looks like this, maybe a little bit smaller for you guys compared to what I have up on screen, but there's two functions. If you're familiar with programming, functions are essentially buttons that you can write. Like you can call a function. In other words, you can press a button. And in the function implementation, you can run additional commands. In other words, after you press the button, things are going to happen according to how you have it scripted. So we have two functions, or in other words, two buttons that we can program. The first one is setup, which gets called once when you first run your application. And then the second one is loop. And then this one gets called many times, infinity. It runs on a loop. So it runs to the bottom of the instruction set and then it jumps back to top. But we're not going to run our own code today. We're going to take the one that is available on the Arduino tutorial websites, which I think we still have up here. So we're just looking at this a little bit earlier. So we've done all of this wiring. This all looks good. And they're telling us here are some commands that you can use, but we're not going to go too deep into the command. We're just going to copy the code. If you're looking at the code, some sections of it might be gray and other sections might have colors on it. We're just going to copy the whole thing and then paste it here. And then let's take a look at what we've pasted. So you can see that the first section of the code is just a bunch of human readable text. This is documentation, and it's denoted by /*, and then you write your documentation, and at the end you write */. So it's kind of like HTML tags. Or strikes through text. Anything in between the section is not interpreted by the machine, so this is all like for human reading purposes. After that, we still have our setup and we have our loop, which I talked about a little bit earlier. This one gets run once. This one gets run forever until it runs out of power. But we're not gonna go into this too much. Let's just go and run it. So there's a button on the top left, which is an arrow, and it says, if I hover over it, it says upload. I know it's really tiny for you guys, but you're gonna have to take my word for it. I'm gonna press this upload button, and it's asking me to save this program onto my disk somewhere. So just the source code for it, and I'm gonna call it blink stream. Okay, so I have pressed the upload button. It's giving me some status messages on the bottom. It says Sketch uses 924 bytes of program storage. Maximum is 32 kilobytes. Global variables use 9 bytes. Blah blah blah. And it seems like it's gone through because if you've noticed on the camera, which I will switch to right now, here's the side cam, our little LED is blinking. We've done it. This is what we wanted to achieve today. We wanted to test the Arduino board. I purchased this back in 2017, I think. I wanted to make sure that it was still working and that I can still upload code to it and we can have things work. And I didn't want to spend too much time learning the language. I just wanted to make sure that I had the correct software installed. Want to make sure I had the right tools. And we've done it today. It is blinking. A couple of fun things we can do right now, just because we are on this page. The setup for this code for this is not too complicated. It just says it sets some stuff up on the internal side. But the loop code is kind of interesting because what it's saying is I'm gonna tell this LED built-in, which I'm guessing this is gonna be pin number 13. I'm gonna tell pin number 13 to go high voltage. That's the first command. I will tell number 13 to go high. And then I'm gonna wait 1000. 1000 what? Well, based on the behavior of this this red light here, it seems like it's 1000 milliseconds. And according to the comment, which is denoted by the message after the // everything after // is ignored. After the code, there's a comment and it says wait for 1 second. So whomever authored this was nice enough to tell us what this command is supposed to do. So the first command was tell pin number 13 to go high. Second command was let's go and wait 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. And then the third command says tell pin number 13 to go low and then wait another 1 second. So all it's doing is high, wait, low, wait, which makes sense, right? So there are some fun things that we can do here, which is we can change the timing. So it's waiting for 1 second in between each action. But instead of waiting 1 second, let's just wait 500 milliseconds, which is half a second. So let's see what happens when we press the upload button. And it takes a second, and let's go back to the camera. And as you guys can tell, the light is blinking a little bit faster now. Let's go and modify this just a little bit more, just for fun. Instead of 500, let's do 100 milliseconds. So it's supposed to turn on, wait 1/10 of a second, turn off, and then wait another 1/10 of a second, and then repeat. Here's a pop quiz for anyone who is viewing this. If I have this program running, how many times will it blink in a second? You can type your answers in chat, and then let's look at the experimental results. So think about it. It's gonna turn on, wait 1/10 of a second, turn off, and then wait another 1/10 of a second. So how many times does it blink per second? Take a guess, write it in chat if you want, and then let's experimentally determine the results. Okay, let's press this upload button and let's see. So it's still a little bit hard to tell, especially dependent on the frame rate of my camera here. I'm not sure if it's 30 frames per second or 60, but it is blinking 5 times a second. So if you answered 5, you are correct. Why 5 times a second and not 10 times a second? I mean, we're waiting for a tenth of a second, right? So it should blink 10 times a second, right? Well, no, because we're turning it on, and it's on for a tenth of a second, and then it's off for another tenth of a second. So when it blinks, it has to be both on and off. So you have to add those two together. Every blink takes 200, right? Because every blink requires on and off. Does that make sense? So you're doing 5 sets of on off, each set taking 200. So it's blinking 5 times a second. And going back to the Arduino versus Raspberry thing, the timings for Arduino is a lot more precise. So I think get as low as like let's do 50 milliseconds. And this won't show up properly on stream. It won't show up properly on stream because stream is at 60 frames per second, and naturally every 50 milliseconds means, actually I still have high enough frame rate to technically capture some of this repeating pattern, but if I make it go down to like I don't know, like 20 milliseconds, this is definitely not going to show up on stream. It shows up for me in real life, and it's like blinking extremely fast right now to the point where it's like a little bit nauseating. Let me see if I can get to the side cam. But on stream, I bet for you guys it just looks like it's on, or maybe it's like kind of flickering on. And that's because the webcam captures 60 frames per second, whereas this is blinking multiple times per frame. So you guys probably can't see the blinking, but Arduino is very precise with its output timings, which is going to be very useful for the next phase of this project. For the next phase of this project, we're going to be setting up these LED strips. It's not going to be today, but we are going to be hooking it up to our breadboard. And the way that these LED strips are programmed is that you send it a signal, and you send it a signal at a very specific timing, right? You might say, okay, if I say on, off, or in other words, blink, blink, long blink, then that's red, or long blink, 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 that's blue, right? It's kind of like Morse code. You can encode messages into your timings. And we are going to be using the Arduino in order to send those timings to these LEDs. Each one of these LEDs has its own microcontroller on the inside, and they will read these timings, and then they will shine different colors. So that's going to be the next phase of the project, and not for today. Today we just wanted to make sure that we get the whole software installed. We have our breadboard set up for additional prototyping. Stay tuned for more phases on my LED mask project. We're gonna be doing it a little chunk at a time. And hopefully you guys will be here along to learn something and also teach me something. I want to, as much of a student as you guys are for learning how to program Arduino. Once everything is done being prototyped and we have the final schematic for how to wire everything up and the final code, we will purchase a Arduino Nano, which is much smaller than this, and then that will be embedded inside of a airsoft mask, and it will control the LEDs that will shine through the mesh of the airsoft mask, and then I will put that on in stream for you guys. To show your names on my face, because that's what I wanted to do on Twitch. Thank you guys for tuning in today. We are at roughly an hour and 15 minutes. We played some Genshin earlier. We sent those Genshiners over to Kylie, and we did some programming, some basic proof of concept, hello world stuff. I hope you guys have enjoyed and learned something new, or at least found my voice interesting. Let's see. Why don't we find someone to raid? Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're interested in following up on my project, please hit that follow button, and then there is also the Discord if you want to know when I go live. What else? I stream on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I mostly stream video games and not programming. But I do intend on keeping on this project and streaming the programming part of it at a somewhat regular cadence that I will announce over on Discord. Thank you guys for tuning in today, and let's go and find someone to raid in the programming channel, because I have never streamed in this category before. Oh, let's see. Twitch.tv, and let's see who else is in this category of technology. Science and technology. What's going on here? There's all sorts of things going on here. People are programming. I think I've seen a NVIDIA 3080 watcher. Best Fish and Carol on stream. This looks like an LED project. Is this it? Or is this completely unrelated? I'm not sure what's going on. This looks like a webcam. There's graphs going on. This one, cybersecurity and research. Humidity, temperature. Huh. It's like another webcam. Hot chicks. Which is... Oh my god, this is so cute. It's literally a bunch of chicks. Okay, I'm gonna send you guys over to Adamman555. Heading off for tonight. Yes, absolutely. We have finished our goal for today of making a LED blink at an interval that we would like to specify, and test out our software and hardware to ensure correct installation. Again, I have been Chop Soy, and I am not a robot. I hope that you guys will enjoy these hot chicks coming to your area, which is literally a incubation bin for chicks. And we have 4 viewers ready to raid Aidman555 to look at some hot chicks. I will see you guys at a different iteration. Have a good night. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Pokey. Thank you, Toast. Thank you, Jane Upster. And I think that is everyone who has posted so far. Good night. Bye-bye. Right now.